New reaction from President Trump this morning, one day after offering an immigration deal to protect dreamers. But Democrats say no, rejecting the White House plan for securing our borders. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom on this Tuesday morning, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith.
Morning to you, Sandra. I'm Bill Hammer. Good morning, everybody. Democrats calling the president's list of priorities a non-starter. Among the requests, build the border wall. Hire 10,000 ICE officers and 600 prosecutors. Require the use of E-Verify to prevent the hiring of illegal workers. And a new points-based system for green cards. President Trump tweeting this today. The problem with agreeing to a policy in immigration is that the Democrats don't want secure borders. They don't care about safety for the USA. End tweet.
The acting head of Immigration and Customs Enforcement making it clear big changes need to be made earlier on America's Newsroom.
For those who enter this country illegally, they have committed a crime. Let's not forget that. We're enforcing the laws that Congress enacted. We prioritize those that are public safety threats and national security threats, but we took an oath to enforce the immigration laws of this country, and that's what we're doing. To enter this country illegally is a crime. We can't forget that. That's a message that's been lost in the last decade.
Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill. Mike?
Sandra, good morning. Expect a lot of talk about this topic as House lawmakers return from the Columbus Day holiday. Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton is praising President Trump, saying, quote, "These kinds of reforms are long overdue. I'm encouraged to see the president's continued leadership on this issue, and I stand ready to work with him and my colleagues to build an immigration system that supports the American worker and boosts our economy." Top Democrats say their members are unified in opposition to the president's ideas, but it's not clear if they all agree about their response. Some are threatening that they won't vote for must-pass spending bills in December unless young people caught up in this DACA issue are given legal status with a path to citizenship. The president has spoken in recent weeks about addressing both security and the status of these young people.
We're talking about taking care of people that were brought here, people that have done a good job and were not brought here of their own volition. But very importantly, what we want, we have to have a wall.
Some rank and file Democrats say they recognize this is just the start of negotiation.
Clearly, that was a pretty aggressive first volley by the president that has a lot of non-starters in it for a lot of us. So I hope that he recognizes that the Democrats want to help solve this issue. We want to be firm on border security, but we also want to make sure we take care of these kids who did nothing wrong and are here in the United States.
Other Democrats are saying if Republican leaders need Democrat votes to pass must-pass spending bills, then there need to be Democrat priorities, such as DACA, included in those measures. Sandra?
Mike, thank you.
Sure.
Meanwhile, President Trump now opening up in a wide-ranging interview with Forbes magazine, talking about his economic agenda and foreign policy. He's also blaming his predecessor for the struggles on Obamacare. Quote, "What we're doing is trying to keep it afloat because it's failing. I mean, the insurance companies are fleeing and have fled. They fled before I got here. But with that being said, no, Obamacare is Obama's fault," end quote. Kevin Court, North Lawn, White House. Good morning to you, Kevin, with more on this now.
Oh, here we go again, right? Healthcare once again, Bill, back in the spotlight. The president saying this time he's actually willing to bypass congressional lawmakers to bring the American people healthcare reform that they so richly deserve, and frankly, that GOP leaders on Capitol Hill have been saying for years that they actually desire. Let me share a bit of a tweet that the president put out this morning. He said this: "Since Congress can't get its act together on health care, I'll be using the power of the pen to give great health care to many people fast." This, of course, despite the one-vote setback in the Senate and repeated failed attempts by the GOP to give the American people repeal and replace. Something the president said, "You know, now I think I can do it if I bargain with both sides of the aisle." In fact, he said as much in a Forbes magazine interview just released. He said this, and this is an interesting bit. He said, "I think the Democrats want to make a deal." President referring to Obamacare. "At the same time, I think I have a deal with the Republicans, so I have the best of both worlds." Now, there is one certainly person on Capitol Hill who's been very forceful in his disagreement with this idea of repeal and replace. That is Rand Paul. He wants to get away from this idea of let's just fix something that's bad and broken. Let me share a tweet that he put out today talking about his desire to work with the president. He said, "Look, this would be a great plan and a big deal for millions of Americans," talking about some new health care. So I've been working with Donald Trump for months on this details soon. Now, as for the president, I just want to share just a bit more from that Forbes interview. There's so much to unpack there, Bill. He also said, look, I'm having a great time. I'm enjoying the job. He did, as you point out, say it was Obama's fault for Obamacare. And I thought this was also interesting. He said he doesn't feel any obligation to honor previous deals from administrations past. Very interesting indeed. By the way, Henry Kissinger here at the White House today. And we also have an interesting meeting coming up with Tillerson and Maddow ahead of the Iran deal redux. A lot happening here, Bill.
That's the A-team. Thank you, Kevin Cork from the North Lawn. All right, Sandra.
Joining us for more on this, Michael Warren, a senior writer for the Weekly Standard. Michael, thank you for joining us this morning. So much to get to here, but you just heard everything going on that the president has laid out as far as his proposals on immigration. Democrats responding by basically saying this is a non-starter. Why?
Yeah, well, we're getting two different accounts of that meeting last month between Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the president. And the Democrats said from the beginning that the president agreed that he would find some kind of legislative fix and agree to a legislative fix to this problem with the so-called Dreamers, the DACA fix. And the Democrats said they'd be willing to, give a little bit on border security. But the Democrats said that, according to that deal, that a border wall was out of the question. Now, the president and the White House have not been so clear about this. I asked the White House a couple of days ago, an official who was in that meeting, who said there was never actually a deal made, that it was a deal to make a deal. And I think that confusion about what it is exactly the two sides of this agreed to is leading now to this confusion today, where the president's offering these immigration proposals that I really do believe are a non-starter for the Democratic leadership and the Democratic base as well. So the question is, well, where does it go from here? Is this something that the White House is willing to negotiate on this list of legislative priorities? They're not being particularly clear on that.
So when you look at the president's response to all of this, saying the problem with agreeing to a policy on immigration is that Democrats don't want secure borders. They don't care about safety for USA. The fact that the president laid out so much here, we talked to Brit Hume yesterday, he said it's tough not to see room for negotiation here between Republicans and Democrats. Does that question then fall squarely on the lap of Democrats then? Do you not want to secure our borders?
Well, I think you heard from Tim Ryan, who I believe is also considering possibly running for president as well, sort of trying to find a middle ground there for Democrats, recognizing that sort of a strict no border security at all position for Democrats is not politically palatable for them. But look, I do think that this is a problem for the Republicans as well, and particularly for the Trump administration, because as far as my reporting tells me, there's not a consistent view within the White House about what exactly they're willing to negotiate on or not. They've laid out these principles, but also the president has indicated, has sent signals in that meeting last month at the White House that he was willing to negotiate. Then the White House says these are our priorities. They must get passed if there's going to be a DACA fix. I think perhaps there's more clarity behind the scenes that we're not seeing in public, but certainly with the public messages that the White House is sending and that Democrats on Capitol Hill are sending don't really give us a clear path forward, at least as far as I can tell.
Well, Nancy Pelosi letting us know exactly how she thinks and what she thinks of all this, indicating that she's willing to play hardball to protect these dreamers, saying that she wouldn't rule out withholding support for end-of-year budget bills and risk a government shutdown if they don't get what they want here.
Yeah, I think ultimately government shutdown politics are not good for Republicans, particularly since the Republicans control both houses of Congress as well as the White House. And so I think Nancy Pelosi recognizes that. The interesting wrinkle in all this as well is that President Trump ended the DACA program. Remember, that was started under President Obama. But you got the sense, talking with advisors and even from his own comments on this, that he didn't really want to end it. He wants to find a way to sort of close this gap within the immigration law. So the question really is he willing to sort of stand on this through any government funding fight, any of these fights over the immigration priorities, if it means that the DACA kids don't get protections? Yeah. I'm not so sure he's not going to blink in that fight.
The timing is going to get very interesting. As Pelosi said in an interview with the Washington Post on Monday, we have to do it before Christmas. That's just the way it is. We'll keep watching.
A lot to do.
Michael, thank you.
He's very right about it. If do not get some security in return for your request, you're probably not going to get a deal. So how far will they go? We'll see. Newt Gingrich coming on this in a moment, too, here. President Trump digs coal, right? And made big promises on the trail when he said this. Remember?
Thinking about the miners all over this country. We're going to put the miners back to work. We're going to put the miners back to work. We're going to get those mines open.
So now the Trump team is set to follow through on a plan they hope will revive the coal industry. Will this plan work? Karl Rove on deck in moments on that.
Looking forward to speaking with him. Meanwhile, Google now joining the list of companies used by Russia to spread misinformation during the presidential election. So does Silicon Valley have a Russia problem?
Also, check this out here. We are watching a dangerous and deadly situation in northern and southern California. Wildfires have been devastating. Listen to that wind, leaving some with only moments to escape with their lives.
When the flames came up, we came down here and you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face. Fire was coming up over the homes, probably 100-foot flames over here spawning on both sides of the streets.
It is 7:14 in California, and the onslaught of deadly fires now blazing across California, and some of the scenes look and sound like this.
Oh my God!
Just devastation, and thousands rush to escape those flames, some of them given only minutes to get out. Crews say firefighters are battling 15 fires over a 200-mile area in northern California. 11 dead, 100 missing. Flames have torched at least 1,500 homes and businesses. And for some, just the ability to come back to their neighborhood, they find when they get there that nothing has been spared.
That's our home right there. So it's gone. Everything, we were out busy. We managed to save our dogs and stuff, but that's it. We got the clothes on our back.
Well, firefighters say most of the damage in the city of Santa Rosa, which is Sonoma County, north of Napa. Flames are also devastating the region's famous wineries, which attract millions of visitors a year, a huge business, as you know. Meanwhile, in Southern California, heavy smoke from a nearby fire turned the skies orange over Disneyland. Look at that picture. Flames are now threatening thousands of homes in Southern California as well, so we'll keep you updated on what we're learning today with the sun about to rise there on the West Coast.
It was wrong for the last administration to declare a war on coal, and it's right for this administration to say that the war is over.
President Trump promised help for coal country on the campaign trail, as you'll remember, and today his administration taking a big step toward fulfilling that promise when Scott Pruitt signs an order rolling back some key Obama administration regulations. Let's talk more about this with Karl Rove, former White House Deputy Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush, and a Fox News contributor. Scott Pruitt yesterday, Karl, declaring the war on coal is over, that rule being signed today. This is a big change, and is it a big sign of this president following through on his campaign promises?
Absolutely. This is a big pledge during the campaign. The previous administration had created this very ambitious rule designed to close down coal plants, use natural gas in the interim, but ultimately force the energy industry in America to rely upon wind and solar to produce our electricity. The U.S. Supreme Court had found that this was an overreach and had stayed the order. During the campaign, President Trump said if elected, candidate Trump said if elected, he would revoke the order. And when he came into office, he directed his head of the Environmental Protection Agency to begin on that. Ironically enough, Scott Pruitt was the Oklahoma Attorney General and one of 28 Attorney Generals, state Attorney Generals, who had sued the federal government successfully to stay the order. So this is something that he knows a lot about, and he's gone about it methodically and has put out a new order withdrawing the old Clean Power Rule and then beginning a process to get public input on what ought to be done to reduce actual pollution at existing coal-fired plants.
You know, we've seen criticism in recent days by even members of the president's own party that this president isn't getting things done. You have this happening today, and the EPA saying he's speaking directly to people in coal country about how the rule negatively affected the whole industry. He promised he would do this. He's doing this. There is optimism that this will bring jobs back to the coal industry. You know, can this be seen as a big win for this administration?
Well, it's a big win, but it's a regulatory win. And the president has a number of things like this that he can do by the power of the executive order or by administrative rules from the department. One of the biggest victories the president has had is simply slowing the onslaught of regulatory actions by the federal government. If you compare what was done, for example, in the first 6 months of the Obama administration and compare that to the amount of new rules and regulations that came out of this one, there's a dramatic decline in the burdens that are being placed on American commerce and business and producers as a result. For example, this is just one of the big ones, but another big one was to basically take on another rule that basically gave the federal government the ability to regulate a wet spot any place on a farm by declaring them navigable waters. This was going to be a huge burden for particularly farmers, and the administration moved quickly to stay this order and then withdraw it. So yeah, it's a big win, but let's be clear. There's a limit to how much you can't govern for 4 years simply by undoing the previous guy's regulatory actions. You got to have some legislative achievements as well.
Carl, I want to point out this brand new interview in Forbes. Inside Trump's had an exclusive interview with the president and the single theory that explains everything. In it, the president lays out something he says we've never heard before. He says, I also have another bill, an economic development bill, which I think will be fantastic, which nobody knows about, which you are hearing about for the very first time. Economic development incentives for companies to be here. It's both a carrot and a stick. It's an incentive to stay, but it is perhaps even more so if you leave. It's going to be very tough for you to think that you're going to be able to sell your product back into our country. This just out. What do you make of it?
Well, let's see what that is. I mean, it sounds like a protectionist measure where if a company leaves the United States, is maybe bought by a foreign company or moves its headquarters from the U.S. to a foreign company for tax reasons, that they won't be able to sell back into the United States. We've signed a number of agreements since World War II that commit the United States to opposing exactly those kind of measures. We would have to abrogate a great many treaty agreements in order to do that, and it could set off a trade war. If, on the other hand, by what the president says is that he wants to have a fair tax system, a so-called territorial tax system. We're the only major industrialized country in the world that doesn't have a territorial tax system. What that means is we double tax the profits of American companies. If an American company makes them to pay a second tax when they bring that profit home.
And the more you see things like this and you hear this from the president, you get that business-friendly environment. Bill's asking me why the stock market keeps going up. There you have it. All right, Karl Rove, thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Sandra.
Down 23,000.
Yes.
Hold on. President Trump now responding to Rex Tillerson after last week's White House drama, the back and forth. A week ago, the Secretary of State said this.
I'm not going to deal with petty stuff like that. I mean, this is what I don't understand about Washington. Again, you know, I'm not from this place, but the places I come from, we don't deal with that kind of petty nonsense. So
in a brand new interview, we'll tell you how the president is reacting to that. Coming up.
2 more residents have died from the Florida nursing home that lost power after Hurricane Irma, bringing the total number of deaths to 14. The home has come under heavy scrutiny after employees failed to evacuate residents sooner from the sweltering building, which lost power during the storm. Many families have already filed lawsuits.
Google now on the growing list of tech companies that may have been used by the Russian government to spread disinformation. The issue for Congress is whether or not it had any impact on the 2016 election. By the way, Twitter and Facebook are on that list as well. At the same time, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is taking aim at Silicon Valley over privacy protection. Interesting debate here. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Harris live in Washington to try and sort that all out for us. Where are we now, Catherine? Good morning.
Well, thank you, Bill, and good morning. The Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is speaking at the Naval Academy a short time from now. In a series of recent high-profile speeches, Rosenstein has described how encryption is blocking time-sensitive law enforcement investigations. Rosenstein has not come out against encryption, but he says the advent of warrant-proof encryption is a serious problem, specifically messaging applications and smartphones. Most people don't realize that nearly half of all smartphones and other digital devices seized by the FBI are encrypted and of no use to investigators. So that's a key point to listen for this morning, Bill.
Are we expecting anything about Russia?
Well, Rosenstein, of course, is a pivotal figure in the Russia investigation with the recusal of his boss, Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The main investigation, as you know, is led by Special Counsel Robert Mueller, and the mandate is broad. To what extent did Russia and its proxies interfere in the 2016 elections? And was there any coordination between Trump campaign officials and Moscow? As you mentioned, the big tech companies may publicly testify as early as next month on Capitol Hill about their platforms and how they were used to spread bad information during the election cycle. And they're now updating their policies to ensure Russia or any foreign government can't leverage the web. Last week, the Senate Intelligence Committee leadership laid out the issues.
I was concerned at first that some of these social media platform companies did not take this threat seriously enough.
If we used solely the social media advertising that we have seen, there's no way that you can look at that and say that that was to help the right side of the ideological chart and not the left, or vice versa. They were indiscriminate.
And the senator said political ads were up over 700% in the digital space between 2012 and 2016, and that's going to be another key issue to listen to at the Naval Academy about 2 hours from now, Bill.
Okay, indeed we shall. Thank you, Catherine Herridge, with headlines then. Thank you, out of Washington. Sandra.
Senator Rand Paul hinting he'll vote against the Republican tax plan after saying it was one of his top priorities back in November.
I think there's a lot of things you can do, but I wouldn't wait around for overall tax reform. I'd just start passing some simple bills lowering tax rates.
How the White House is leaning on Senator Paul to get him in line. Newt Gingrich is here in our studio on that and much more.
Also, watch this story. Europe on the brink, Spain bracing for a showdown. We will tell you why when we go live to Barcelona in just a moment here on America's Newsroom. It is 10:31 here in New York City. Can Republicans get a deal on tax reform? Watch this issue because it's heating up and it's October. The White House putting pressure on one Republican in particular. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul feeling the heat. Politico with a story out today. Rand will stand in the way of tax cuts. Newt Gingrich, a former House Speaker and Fox News contributor and a seller of many, many books that I'll get to in a moment. Nice to see you today, and good morning to you. I heard you say, well, first of all, is Rand Paul going to stop this like Obamacare?
Well, we don't know. I mean, senators have the ability, it's part of the way the Constitution is written, they have the ability to withstand pressure because they're not up for re-election next year.
Well, this is true. But, you know, on taxes, you said, don't go for the generational reform. Just go for a tax cut.
And that's where Rand was back in November. He said just cut taxes. So I think they've got to find a way, and I can't say this too strongly. Republicans have to be flexible, and they have to be clever, and they've got to keep rewriting the bill until they get enough votes in the House and Senate. And they have to get it done by Thanksgiving, because they have to have so much economic growth in the first 2 quarters of next year that they can run as the party of jobs and take-home pay and prosperity, because that's what they need to win the election next fall. And I think this is really much, much more important than health care.
Does this Congress or does this president have the ability together to get that done?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think we'll know till it gets done. But, I mean, I think that this is a period, frankly, for them to get beyond tweeting and attacking each other and trying to pressure each other, and to spend time listening to each other. And, you know, I used to have a standard rule. Tell me what you have to have and tell me what you can't have. And then I'll tell you what I have to have and what I can't have. And somewhere in that middle, there's a box called legislation. But that requires listening to each other, not yelling at each other.
Yeah, you sound like a deal maker yourself. By the way, Thanksgiving's a tight timeline. We can concede that based on what we've seen.
That's why they need to push it.
On immigration, earlier today, the president tweeted this: problem with agreeing to a policy on immigration, he writes, is that the Democrats don't want secure borders. They don't care about safety for the USA. Take the first part of that about secure borders. You will not get immigration reform unless Democrats give on border control. I don't know about the wall, but certainly more security has to be a part of this.
Look, and the Democrats have a huge problem because if the issue is national security, whether it is heroin coming across the border, fentanyl coming across the border, nuclear weapons coming across the border, terrorists coming across the border, very hard to go to the country at large and say, I want to be the party of weakness and the party of putting you in danger. It's the same thing with sanctuary cities. I mean, when you look at 4,000 people shot last year in Chicago, you have to wonder, how can Rahm Emanuel, as the mayor of Chicago, want to be a sanctuary city? I mean, doesn't he want to get rid of criminals rather than keep criminals? So there are certain parts of this where the Democrats are at their weakest, and I think border security is one of those.
California is a sanctuary state.
Yeah, look,
it doesn't stop a city.
The California political system is insane. I mean, you go and look at what they're now doing. It is an enormously rich state which has taken money from the entire world through places like Facebook and Apple and Google and other things in Silicon. So Silicon Valley has been the largest creator of wealth in the planet for the last 40 years. And that plus Hollywood prop up California despite the best efforts of liberals to make it impossible for it to function.
A few more topics here. Big interview today out in Forbes magazine, and there's a lot in this interview too. Here's one of them with regard to Rex Tillerson. The point of the article is that the president counterpunches. Here's the quote: I think it's fake news, but if he did that, referring to the moron comment, I guess we'll have to compare IQ tests, and I can tell you who is going to win. I'm told from White House officials that was a joke to be taken in sarcasm. What about this relationship between Tillerson and Trump?
Look, it was always going to be difficult because Tillerson led one of the largest corporations in the world. He was at the center of power. He made all the decisions, and then he's a brilliant guy and did a great job. Now, all of a sudden, he's essentially staff. It's an enormous jump, and it takes, and all these guys go through the same experience, because in the end, power in America at the executive branch level is the president. It's not anybody else. And the president can delegate that power any way he wants to. I once had a former governor who'd become a cabinet officer say, I got this 27-year-old calling me and saying the president wants X. And my advice was, tell him if the president means it, he can call. But don't pay attention to the 27-year-old. But there's always this tension. Now, Tillerson is a very sophisticated guy. And he has, I think, a different approach because he did billion-dollar deals worldwide. He has a different approach than Trump did. I think there's probably some healthy tension. But my sense is that Rex is going to stay. I think Jim Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, is going to stay. I think every morning John Kelly gets up, it is good for America that he's there. I think he's going to stay, and he has probably the hardest job in Washington right now. Trump is the most disruptive person we have elected since Andrew Jackson in 1828. I mean,
but you're making a case for stability.
I'm saying Camus once said there's a moderation which is the tension of the two wings, okay, that are held together. Trump represents that kind of stability. It's like watching, a bicyclist in the Tour de France. I mean, he's going 90 miles an hour downhill on a bicycle, and you're hoping that he doesn't hit a really big rock.
That, or he's able to trudge up the hill that's coming up next. Listen, you're selling books out today, hardback. It's called Vengeance. This book ties in everything. Terrorism and the president and North Korea, so this is out today. But also out today, your wife Callista has a book called Remember the Ladies. And I imagine you'd rather talk about this book than yours.
Well, actually, Callista would rather I talk about that book.
Well, that's true, too.
Because, of course, she's up to had been nominated to be the ambassador to the Vatican, and so she
Which
can't
appears
talk
that
about
it's going to go through.
I think it'll go through next Monday, and it's a great honor, and she's very much looking forward to it. Let me just say, if you want an intense introduction to reality that's pretty close to the daily news, read Vengeance. It's amazing. If you want a really happy book for 4 to 8-year-olds that introduces them to the first ladies, then I think Remember the Ladies is a much happier introduction.
Terrific. What are you, Amazon.com?
Yeah, absolutely. All day.
Giving Barnes and Noble a run.
Yeah. In fact, we'll be at Barnes and Noble at Tyson's tomorrow night.
Look at that. Another one. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We'll talk again.
Thanks.
All right. Sandra, what is next?
A tense situation unfolding in Spain right now, with Catalonia possibly declaring its independence tonight. Extra police are posted at the regional parliament, where the Catalan president will address lawmakers in just a matter of hours. Emotions are high across the country, with both separatists and unionists holding massive rallies leading up to tonight's speech. John Huddy, live in Barcelona for us. John?
Yeah, we're all waiting to see what happens and what comes out of that speech. And you talked about the police presence. Well, take a look. Let me kind of show you the scene a little bit here. This is the Catalonian police, basically regional police, outside the entrance to the city park here in Barcelona, where the Catalonian Parliament building is located. We're talking about hundreds of officers, more than 1,000 members of the media, by the way, including international media, such as ourselves, have descended upon Barcelona to see what comes out of this. Now, you mentioned the Catalonian president, Carles Puigdemont, will be addressing the parliament in just over an hour, and there's been a lot of speculation, Sandra, as to what he will say. Will he declare unilateral independence, that is, Catalan seceding from Spain, or will he take a softer approach, that is, more a symbolic declaration, acknowledging the referendum vote last Sunday, that there is support for independence, but possibly engaging in more dialogue, discussions, maybe even more regional elections, perhaps to come up with an assembly to start drafting a constitution or the framework for such. That said, Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy said that any discussion of independence is just off the table. He says it's not going to happen, and that if Catalan declares independence, that he will use all force, that Spain will take control of the region, that they will prevent that from happening. And Sandra, European Union officials have been essentially appealing, even pleading with President Puigdemont and other pro-separatist leaders to back off, to stop the full court press, and to engage in discussions. They don't want to see this region thrown into political or economic chaos, and that is the concern, along with, if they do declare independence, national police are brought in, the specter of violence happening like we saw during the referendum vote last Sunday. That is, though, Sandra, the worst-case scenario. Again, Catalonian President Carles Puigdemont will be addressing the parliament in just over an hour, so the drama here continues to unfold. Sandra?
I'm sure we'll see you again shortly. John Huddy, thank you.
What a story that is to watch, too, right? President Trump firing a new round of tweets at the NFL. This after the vice president's walkout on Sunday in Indianapolis. Is the battle over the anthem going away? Ari Fleischer live on all that coming up next from D.C.
Plus, new information on the Las Vegas shooter, why police are struggling to answer the key question, why?
We do not believe there is one particular event in the suspect's life for us to key on. This individual purposely hid his actions leading up to this event, and it is difficult for us to find the answers.
President Trump once again lashing out at the NFL over national anthem protests. The president tweeting this morning, quote, "Why is the NFL getting massive tax breaks while at the same time disrespecting our anthem, flag, and country? Change tax law." Vice President Mike Pence weighed in on the debate by walking out of Sunday's 49ers-Colts game after some players took a knee, about 20 of them, during the anthem. Joining me now is Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary for George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor. Ari, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you.
So where does this battle between the president and the NFL, he's tweeting about it this morning, where does this go?
This goes to the owners of NFL teams now. If I'm an owner, I take it to the next constructive step. The players should get off their knees and get into action. If I'm an owner, I start setting up meetings with police chiefs. Police chiefs would love to have the voice of NFL players in their communities. And these players who have objections to fundamentally what it's about is police brutality, as they allege, they should get to know the police. They should talk to police chiefs and have their voice heard. There's a constructive outcome here if people would stop the polemics and the publicity.
Vice President Pence made a very big statement by walking out of that statement along with his wife Karen on Sunday. There's a lot of discussion happening this morning and late last night about, was this planned? Did the president tell him to do this? Was it a PR stunt? You know, inside politics, inside the White House baseball, what was this planned?
Look, I think both sides are genuine. I don't think the players who are taking these are SOBs. I totally disagree with them. I raise my children to stand, cover their heart, and face the flag, hat off. That's what I do. But the players who have a different view of America, they're grappling with something that they see through their eyes. Vice President Pence, 100% right in walking out. His son is Marine, and I love people who respect the flag. But my point here is there's still room, both sides being genuine, to do things. I don't think it was a publicity stunt, but I do think there's a good outcome can come from this. And when people are arguing like this over something fundamental, rise up, rise above the noise, do something good and constructive. Our communities need the voices of NFL players. Police chiefs would love to make those alliances. This is waiting to happen.
Does the president have any points here with his tweet this morning about change tax law? NFL shouldn't be getting tax breaks. I dug up the most recent thing is the NFL does not have its tax-exempt status anymore as of a few years ago. So what do you think the president's talking about there?
Well, I think the president is stirring a pot where the pot stir helps him. The president is largely right on this issue, even though I disagree with him calling them SOBs. I also disagree with him saying people should be fired in the private sector. The government doesn't have that power. But the president is right about standing for the flag, and so is the vice president. So politically, it's a winner for Donald Trump, but it's a messy winner, particularly the way he approached it. But there's no question most Americans support standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and the national anthem. And so when the president's talking about the tax breaks, it's just a way for him to get back into this discussion, which politically he wins.
Fair point. This president has a lot on his plate right now. There is a lot as far as tax reform, health care, immigration, Ari, a lot to get done and some pretty ambitious timelines. We're in mid-October now. What does the end of the year look like?
Well, that's up to Congress, and it's up to the president to work productively with the Congress. Look, I've spent some time on Capitol Hill and talked to a number of senators and congressmen. They know the burden is on them to get something done, particularly after they could not repeal and replace Obamacare. If they fail on tax reform, which would boost the economy, create economic growth, and higher wages for middle-income Americans, what are they doing here? Why are they in Washington if they can't get to 50% at the end of the day? They have that burden on their shoulders. I sure hope they produce. I think they will, because the price of failure is so great.
Ari Fleischer, it's always good to get your perspective, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra.
All right.
Very interesting to see what they move, right, and when they can. You heard what Speaker Gingrich said. Get it done by Thanksgiving.
Ooh.
I mean, is that...
Hello.
Is that reality?
That's just a little over a month away, Bill.
You're right about that. Diplomatic showdown now between the U.S. and Turkey. What's happening between Washington and Istanbul, and what sparked the feud, and where this goes from here. Details on that coming up next.